We have Guillermo Escobar. Yes. Correct. From MasterCard. And what we're going to do this one a little bit differently. So there's two panelists, and my friend Oscar. You can be my friend too, but I've known Oscar longer. So. My friend Oscar. So we're going to give them each 10 minutes or so to kind of present their thoughts on MPOS. I know we've touched on it, we've seen a couple presenters already kind of share some interesting statistics, but they're each going to spend about 10 minutes talking about their views on MPOS, starting with MasterCard, and then we'll do some Q&A and like to get some good discussion here going, because quite frankly, this should be easy. Everybody should be able to do MPOS, because you just plug into your phone and it works, right?
Oh.
Oh. I was leading you, right? I was giving you a good set of questions. So let's learn from MasterCard about MPOS. Thank you, Jim.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Let me introduce you, let me introduce myself first. My name is Guillermo Escobar, and I'm responsible for acceptance in Mexico and Central America. And I'm relatively new to the industry. And when I came in a year ago, I was challenged with sort of how can we double acceptance in Mexico? And you know, in Mexico and Central America, and you probably, you know, Mexico has the lowest number of terminals per inhabitant or per GDP or any other metric that you wanna measure it by. So, and that's compared to some of other countries in Latin America. So we have a big challenge. So how can we grow acceptance? So, and clearly, you know, at that time when I came into MasterCard, there was this big noise around MPOS. In the US, it had recently started with Square, in Europe with iSettle. So there was a lot of noise around it. So clearly, we saw the opportunity of growing or making sure that that was the way to grow acceptance, or one of the ways to grow acceptance in our countries. So I want to share with you what is that we are doing within MasterCard to promote the adoption of MPOS solutions. And as the title of the panel is the MPOS technology opportunity, I want to leave you with the idea that it's not only about the technology, it's about the business model. So clearly, to be successful, we have to be thinking about the business model, not only about the technology. Clearly, technology is key, but it's not the only or the main element. It has to do with the full business model. So, you probably know, we have a lot of MasterCard branded cards across the globe. We have 36 million acceptance locations. In Latin America, there's around 5 million, and you know those are across all Latin America. But how can we go to really double that or triple those acceptance locations? But the most relevant part is that 8 out of 10 transactions are still cash, and that's globally. If you go to Latin America, that number clearly is lower. So we need to expand acceptance. And technology is great, but it needs to be fit for purpose. So it's clearly, you know, and over the past year, I've been approached by many new players that really thought that MPOS was around buying a dongle in China and bringing it into market, and there you were. You had your own MPOS solution. And clearly, it's much more than that. You know, and back to some of the topics that have been discussed here, it's around interoperability. For us, it's key that all MasterCard branded transactions can be accepted in one of these devices. So that's why we've been stressing I've been stressing the necessity of making sure that you have one device that covers all the specifications set by the industry. So clearly, you need to have all these certifications, and all of them have a purpose. It's not only because during my discussions with entrepreneurs, they see it as a barrier for entry. So they're saying that we are, limiting competition, or that we are imposing unnecessary burdens on smaller players. But all these have a purpose. So that's why I've been stressing the need for them to comply with all these certifications. So clearly EMB, PCI, and our own franchise rules. And so what is that we've been doing? So we've been facilitating the entry of all these new players, helping them navigate what for them might be something really cumbersome or new. So that's what, and in the past year, I've been approached by more than 20 companies of different size and different background. Some entrepreneurs, some established acquirers, some new players. But that's what we've been doing, helping them navigate all these, which is relatively new. So we've been sharing with them best practices. So clearly, it's helping them, providing them with clarity, educate all the different stakeholders. So we, in late summer, we had the first IMPOS forum in Mexico, and it was intended for this, to provide clarity and educate all stakeholders. Then we have also created a registration program, which it will help, create standards and facilitate all the different players that want to enter this market to go to a central place where they can see who has gone through this self-certification process, in order for them to facilitate who can they work with. And it's a simple process, so it has really been a success. And we're also helping with new rules. This is very important, and as some of you have noticed, this has to go country by country. Yes, we talked about compliance and about all these standards established by the regulatory bodies, EMB, PCI, but you all have to be mindful of the local rules. So it's not only that you have a device that has gone through the EMB certification or the PCI certification, then you have to also be mindful of the local regulations. And that's also where we have been helping all these new players. And at the end, this program also helps to provide exposure to the new players. You might be a small company who has probably not a big budget for promotion, but then if an interested party goes into our website, it can show who has done its homework. So clearly, and as you well know, we're pushing and we've been working for a world beyond cash. So, and we understand that for this to be a reality, we need to grow acceptance. We've heard through the day that there's a lot of push from different parties, even from governments, to create electronic money, to digitize money, to put money in a card. But we are just moving the burden from one place to the other if we're not able to expand that sector. So clearly, we are here, we want to promote it, and we're happy to help.
I just want to introduce Oscar, because he is, he's the man. I saw an amazing picture of him skydiving 2 years ago. You wouldn't know it, but he's a thrill seeker. He likes doing fun, cool, exciting things. But more importantly, he's got a fun, exciting presentation for us. So with that, Oscar.
Thank you so much. I'm a thrill seeker. I got married, went to college, got divorced in Miami, so I love this town. Great place to go to school, among other things. So I also started my acquiring career here, so it's good to be back home. I'll talk to you a little bit about Charge Anywhere and the things that we do. And in Charge Anywhere, the reality is that we create technology that accommodate all types of transaction environments. So respecting the legacy of payments, we have technology for regular point of sales that are not going to disappear. We have technology if a merchant wants to take payments via the internet, e-commerce solutions, self-standing solutions. If you want to use your PC as a point of sale, you can do that as well. However, we certainly do shine on this concept of using cell phones and tablets to securely accept or issue payments. So we play on both sides of that arena, mobile POS or mobile wallet. Our technology has had an array of awards, a lot of it for innovation, but a lot of it also for security that we are extremely proud of as well. And for that, we also have the PCI Level 1 security validated gateway, kind of the cloud that connects us anywhere and everywhere to securely deliver these transactions around the world. So that's kind of what we do. Probably the only guy in the audience with a beeper. That's what happens when we're talking about mobility, but just to let you know, we've been doing this for a long time. That's how the company started. We tied a card reader to this REN 950 pager, and it truly became kind of the first device that a taxi driver was using to take payments on the road. Robust, user-friendly, cost-effective. So a big difference when you see a platform that is born mobile and continues to mature mobile as new devices continue to come out to market, instead of a platform that is really made for point-of-sale devices and is trying to be forced into this whole new mobile ecosystem. So we do that. We certainly are proudly showcasing that MasterCard main showcase here, Purchase New York, showing the future of payments. We are included in that MPOS list that Guillermo spoke about. And we also, like I said, play on the mobile wallet side of the things. We do two things in the mobile wallet side of the arena. One, we provide technology for folks who want to be able to issue payments via phones and tablets for their consumers. Two, and I think what we do most, is that we enable third-party wallets to be recognized at tender types in our MPOS solutions, which is the point of this presentation, the mobile point-of-sale solution. Projects that you might recognize: American Airlines project. When you take an American Airlines flight, before they had a point-of-sale device per plane. Now they have a Samsung Note per flight attendant accepting payments. So whenever you're buying duty-free products, food, beverage, retail products on the plane, that is happening through Charge Anywhere technology. And I won't bore you with the details of that deployment, but I think something worth knowing about it, the things that you don't get to see, because it's very simple to see somebody, like when we started the presentation, right? You swipe a card and that's that. Like Danielle said, yeah, you just put it, you put an audio jack reader to your phone, swipe, and you go. But there's a lot of things that are really required for that swipe and go. In this particular project, it was unique because American Airlines already has an application that controls the consumer experience, that catalog of products of what you buy on the plane. However, at some point, they need to take a payment for that. And being that it's an Android-based project, we use some intent filters to call in unique things of our payment PCI validated app. And then after that, we do some transaction throttling. They have one merchant account talking to 18,000 devices, so we needed to digest the data for the processor. And we did some very unique things on the processing side, so we send transactions to the processor, do the encryption, decryption, the signature capture, send data to the core application system, and also provide an API so the vendor, the actual folks that are loading in the carts in the planes with the products, can have the data they need to do their day-to-day. So a lot more than just swiping a card and going, including, of course, point-to-point encryption. So you have encryption on hardware, encryption on software, and decryption at the PCI Level 1 validated gateway. Another project that very popular, I've taken a lot of traction as well, is what we did with RBM, Redevan Multicolor in Colombia. And I don't know if this is my last slide or it just doesn't go to the next, but I will continue to talk. There you go, great. All right. Well, now we're going to have to work as a team. I'm going to need you back there to push a button. It won't be the first time. Colombia has a very unique situation. They have about 130,000 terminals, but they have close to 1.9 million merchants that should be taking payments. We're talking today a lot about mobile wallets. Ultimately, you can have money on your finger, on your eye, on a plastic, on a phone. You need to have merchants willing and able to monetize that for products and services. Again, I give you money on your phones right now and you die of hunger. That's very, if there's no merchants accepting your phone to buy food, to buy gas, to go to the pharmacy, then you need to have that acceptance point taken care of that. So the solution goes, and if you can go to the next slide, in this project is very clear. You have 130,000 electronic terminals. You want to have close to 1.9 million terminals taking payment. That will be covered through phones and tablets. Yeah, please, that slide in there. So in their project, the unique difference for that particular project is that you'll notice a few things. One, it is mode of entry neutral. So please click through the slide until we finish that slide. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So if you want to swipe for some of the local private label products that are still working on swipe, you can swipe. If you want to swipe and pin, you swipe and pin. If you need EMV with pin, you need EMV with pin. So you have a mode of entry neutral project. If you want to email receipts, you email receipts. If you want to print receipts, you print receipts. Please go back. If you have, we are including a unique keeper transaction at the point of interaction with that card. Then that comes into our app. The app in that particular project was deployed in BlackBerry, in Android. I know BlackBerry is almost a bad term in here, but in BlackBerry, Android, and Apple. So it is operating system neutral. It has a full array of Bing intelligence at the app level. So, you know, there's probably close to 40 different products that right when you put that card, the EMV card on the device, is going to make some decisions at the app level. Do I need to add for the national ID in addition to the PIN? Is it going to be PIN with signature, just PIN? All those kind of decisions and intelligence are locally at the app level. So encryption of the hardware, mode of entry neutral, device operating system neutral, telecommunication carrier neutral, coming into the gateway, doing the full decryption of that transaction, going to RVM, processing host, on a one-to-one connection. Never sensitive data left behind on the phone. Only reference numbers on the phone. Sensitive data is at the PCI Level 1 security validated cloud. And then from there you have an array of additional value-added tools that you can access. You want to see copies of receipts with the signature capture for issues of chargeback resolution and dispute. You don't have to talk to the merchants to show paper. Everything is digitalized in there. You want to have, for example, some of the taxi companies, what they're doing is that everything they do on the phone, headquarters can do through a virtual terminal via web access. So they have the tool to be able to do that. Payment forms for the small merchant that has an insecure web page, but they want to take payments in addition to what they're doing through the phone. They also have the ability with one-click generation of code to have the payment button or payment form to take payments on the virtual environments. So that's that particular project. You can go to the next slide, sir. And you know, we definitely, they're very private with their numbers and how successful the project is. So now definitely this particular project is greatly sponsored by the fellows and the folks at MasterCard. And you will be seeing, if you can click to the next slide, a lot of the publicity that is going to come out soon. You know, Colombia, what they call a pilot in Colombia, not necessarily is the definition of a pilot in other places on the world. For those who are here from, I know that David Vienda Plata is here somewhere. David Plata, excellent. You know, I think that you have several millions of users doing many, many millions of transactions, and you folks humbly still call that a pilot. So the same thing with RVM, Relevan Multicolor, in the case of this device. They have done a very extensive pilot, making sure it's secure before you see the massive marketing that is coming out now for these devices. In that particular project, we're going to do remote key injection. The process that takes place is beyond this presentation, but trust me, instead of going through a secure room, everything is done through the air. You need to do that because you want to move portfolios. One of the advantages of mobile that folks are not looking at is that one thing is how much a point of sale costs versus how much is an audio jack reader or an EMV Bluetooth device costs, but that's really not where your value added is. The idea is that if I want to evolve a country, tomorrow I want to accept the wallets on all these different phones, tomorrow I want to accept a unique payment type, I want to exchange, I want to send cross-demand from this type of merchant to that other type of merchant, I can enable a full portfolio of, you know, 1 million, 500,000, doesn't really matter, of devices overnight. In a regular point of sale world, I have to go create an app, go to the merchant, take that device, because probably I'm going to have to break in that app, I'm going to have to re-inject keys again in the device, go back to my center, re-inject the keys, reinstall the app, go back to the customer, retrain the customer. When you're talking about the mobile world, if tomorrow you want to accept mobile wallets, we click a button, and you have 500,000 people accepting a mobile wallet as a tender type the next day, you cannot move that fast on regular point of sales, and you cannot evolve that fast on regular point of sale. So having said that, if you can go to the next slide, I think that remote key injection, there's pin translation things, and after that we just open the floor for questions so I don't take more time with that. I think we're going to talk about, is Daniel still in the room? We're going to talk about a lot of validations and the security, and I think it's important, Daniel, is we take some time to explain PCI when it comes to mobile applications, because I think this is where the confusion, there's so many mobile providers now. How do you know who's who? I just went to Cards in Paris, and they have a whole new section of mobile solution providers. Everybody says we're PCI compliant. What does that really mean when it comes to mobile applications? You know, it's a question that not many people know. So I think that maybe one of the things that we should cover now when we open the floor is different validations and what do they really mean, and what does PCI, what is the stand of PCI today when it comes to mPOS, accepting payments via phones and tablets. Having said that, I'll leave and then we'll take the rest of the questions for the rest of the section. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, well that was excellent. I told you guys were going to enjoy these two gentlemen. Well, you know, Oscar, you kind of laid it up so nicely. I feel like I'm playing Little League Baseball. You know, when they put the ball in the tee and I just hit the bat. Why don't we start that as our first question? So what does PCI compliant mean? And what does it mean to MPOS providers? And maybe a better question, how do we differentiate between the PCI compliant, quote unquote, and the actual ones who really are?
Yeah, I can start. So for us, you know, and again, it goes back to where you're working, in which country you're working. In the case of Mexico, it's a chip market, but not PIN. So it's chip and signature. So the first challenge was to have a device that was secured in this type of environment. And you know, and we were working on what was already developed for the US, which is actually was Magstripe, or you could go to what was developed for Europe, which is chip and PIN. So the first challenge of the first sort of provider that was in Mexico was to find a solution that would be compliant with this type of setup. And so back to the PCI question, you know, we required for it to be PCI DSS, which is Data Security Standard, and also PCI Transaction Security Standard, PCI PTS. So these are the two most basic sort of requirements. But then, if your app is gonna, if you have an app, it also has to be a secure device. So there's another type of layer within the PCI world. So my point is, you have to be mindful of what country you're working in terms of the setup that's required for PCI.
Well, the PCI, hopefully you all, there's so many acronyms in that industry. I think they wrote the book on that. But PCI, payment card industry, PCI. And I think what happened, and directly related to mPOS and this presentation, is that PCI on June 24th, 2011, even though they made the decision in 2010, they made a public statement on June 24th, 2011, categorizing phones and tablets as category 3. So there's an official statement from PCI, you can look it up, saying phones and tablets are category 3. Then it's only a 2-page statement, so it's very easy to see. And then the second decision they made on that official statement is that PCI will no longer make decisions or reports, will no longer issue reports on validation on category 3 devices. So for all intents and purposes, it doesn't exist today. So whoever tells you on PCI validated with a mobile application, the reality is the validation doesn't exist. That's the bottom line. Because on June 24, 2011, they say until further notice, we're not doing that. What have we done as a company that we are very proud of beyond that is that what was happening before 2011 is that you would hire a PCI, a Payment Application Qualified Security Assessor, QSA, PCI, PA, QSA, to audit your app and go through all the functionality, all the security items, all the different things that matter when it comes to accepting payments, like you would in a regular terminal. So you have an auditing company who has to be a PCI QSA doing the audit of these applications. We continue in Charge Anywhere to pay for these audits. So today, and we always start our conversation backwards, we show you our attestation of validation. The difference is that when you read today an audit from a PCI QSA on a mobile app, what it will tell you is that I'm putting this to the same exact audit, all the functionality, all the security. However, because PCI is no longer providing ROVs, reports on validation, I can only give you an attestation of validation. But I will urge you, regardless of who your provider is, that you do look for that attestation of validation. That it's not only because PCI, I can say I'm PCI compliant if I look at the requirements and I say I'm compliant. And I can tell you, which is what everybody's saying, I read what is necessary and I comply with it. And because there's no longer reports on validation, I'm saying I'm PCI compliant. So I recommend you look at PCI QSA report. It won't be an ROV because they don't exist today. It will be an attestation of validation. And of course then, backing up what Guillermo said, if you're in a country that requires EMV, you want to make sure that you have that device with EMV code level 1 and 2. If you are, unlike Mexico, there is no moving pin. If you're moving pin and you are getting involved in remote key injection of those devices, and most likely you're going to have to do some pin translation. The idea of this ecosystem to work is that you don't want to have to change a full infrastructure supporting POS today to support phones. So for these big processors and these big companies, it needs to behave like any other terminal. So if you need to change from dot butt keys to master session, if you might have a system that can only give you a key per session where you have 100,000 devices behind that session, if you have a policy that you don't want to have the key in the devices, you can only have it in the hardware security module. Whatever the reasons that you might have to get involved in PIN translation when you're accepting EMV with PIN or swipe with PIN, then you need to look for that provider to have a TR39 audit and have FAST as an encryption support organization, another acronym for you, ESO. So now you have PCI DSS level 1 at the gateway, PCI payment application attestation of validation on each app, PCI PTS if you're accepting PIN transaction security, you're accepting PINs done by a PCI QSA, Qualified Security Assessor. If you're taking EMV, make sure you have the EMV 1 and 2. If you're moving PINs, you need a TR39 ESO. It is always helpful to have passed and show experience passing the MTIP, MasterCard Terminal Integration Process, as well as the VADVT. Not that I will, but that I have had experience on mobile passing these certifications as well. Being in the MPOS recommended list by MasterCard certainly is helpful as well.
So just to follow, we have the CIA, FBI, NSA, IBM, NSA, whatever acronyms can I kind of put out there. Basically, our friend here, Oscar, he wrote a book on all the acronyms, and he can explain them later. But really what I took away from that was that PCI compliance and saying that I'm PCI compliant today is kind of like saying, yeah, I paid my fair share of taxes, you don't need to audit me. Is that basically what we're hearing? I'm being very facetious, but
well, again, anybody can say PCI compliant based on what I think. Sure. Because there is no regulation today and there is no report on validation. Anybody that looks at the requirements and say, oh yeah, I comply with this, this, and that, I'm PCI compliant.
So make sure that they, with an auditor, have an attestation.
Yeah, attestation.
All right. So how many of you have ever? First of all, let me back up a bit. And the second thing I heard about is that, you know, I'm a consumer. I get my dongle, I plug it in, it works. That's good for me as a consumer. For you, merchants, businesses, putting it together, it's a lot more complex, right? It's like the duck swimming on water, above the water. It's very easy, just plug in and swipe. But underwater, we have all the mechanics and everything like that working. So a question for the audience, you know, how many of you are making sure that your vendors have that PCI attestation? Do we even, you know, yes? Is it important? Have you, did you go through and validate and actually ask to see the letter? Good. Was it their company?
No. They're working with IDJ company.
Okay. So let's ask some questions from the floor first before I ask a couple more questions of this group. I mean, obviously, you know, MPOS if we look at it, from some numbers were shared earlier, but it's probably the most straightforward value proposition. If you're a merchant and want to accept a credit card payment today, essentially just sign up for a merchant account, get one of the things and plug it in. Am I missing something from a merchant perspective?
And I think it goes back to my original statement that it's around the business model. So there's all these companies that are saying that they have an endpoint solution or a dongle. And it's, whenever I hear these discussions, it's around, they're all going to be targeting the same customers. They're all talking about the independent professionals. They're all talking about the small companies. They're talking about all the, so for me, it's who's really gonna be differentiating their value offering for specific market niches. So it's around the whole solution. It's not only about the dongle. So it's more around what is that you're adding, what's the value that your solution is adding to that business process before the transaction, during the transaction, and after the transaction. So it's building that whole ecosystem, and back to this word about the ecosystem. And it's sort of, okay, it's what's going to be your pricing strategy, what's going to be your segmenting strategy, what's going to be your customer service, how are you going to be managing chargebacks. So it's all these in order for then a merchant to feel comfortable. And I guess my original concern was that with all these companies popping up and showing a device, customers can be fooled. And probably a customer will feel that, okay, I just plug it in and that's it. But if he has a bad experience, then most likely he will not use it again. So that's why we're very interested as an industry to make sure that there's orderly development of these opportunity, this business model. Because if not, it might backtrack in whatever that we're trying to accomplish.
Interesting. That's very, very good insight. So, I mean, what experiences have you, as the audience, have you seen in terms of, have you rolled out MPOS solutions? Any use cases that you can share? Yes, up here in the front.
Perhaps, Guillermo, the question is, we have talked a lot about Mexico and probably Mexico and also Colombia as an example, and Brazil, where you have an open market from an acquirer. Every bank is an acquirer. If you go to most of the other markets in Latin America, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, what you face is that normally there is like a monopoly or even like a duopoly where the acquirers tend to be sometimes the main barrier. And I think that there is like an evangelization, where I think that even most of those acquirers are the same banks that are sometimes shareholders. So it's a game where even though it seems to be so easy, it's not. And when you get into these markets, normally there is not enough scale at the same time. And then, I mean, you guys of anywhere, you know, the device is not something that it used to be the Chinese one at $10. So it's, I mean, the reality is that I think that in this particular case, I don't see that easy. I think that there is pretty complex in terms of how to get there. And also mainly how to break the acquirers barrier. Because I think that that's probably, with the exception of Mexico, one of the key challenges that we have when we want to enter in other markets in Latin America. How you see that?
So definitely, I see. Well, even in Mexico, where you were referring that there's these 17 acquirers, different sizes, and a lot of movement within the MPOS. But again, it's really this model is really dependent on an acquirer, because at least in Mexico, you need a relationship with an acquirer to get access to the payment system. So you cannot just be a very smart entrepreneur with a great idea. You still have to create a relationship with an existing acquirer. Okay. Having said that, clearly there's more opportunity whenever you have 17 acquirers, because you might go to a big bank or to a smaller bank, and they have different mindsets and might be different. But I think that the landscape is changing all across Latin America, and clearly in the past there were 1 or 2 acquirers, but I see that also changing, and with it, sort of, I see that it'll take more time, but definitely as the market structure, the acquired market structure across Latin America evolves, I think there will be more opportunities, especially if you see the case of Brazil. Brazil usually it's ahead in terms of the payments industry, but it hasn't really catch up as accelerated the MPOS model, because they were still struggling in generating more competition around the basic acquiring model. So there were these two companies that concentrated a lot, but in the past year you've seen the entry of more competition. So as more competition enters, there's going to be these opportunities for other players.
Well, you have a great point, and there's definitely what we call the gatekeepers, right? Who holds, ultimately, it doesn't really matter if it's coming from a phone, from a point of sale, from a cash register. Those transactions come, regardless of how it's routed, to a gatekeeper, then connects to Visa, MasterCard, and allows that authorization or decline or whatever to take place. So I understand what you're saying clearly. What I think is happening, and we're seeing this in many countries, and we are working in some of those countries where you have just 1 or 2. There are an array of reasons why these folks want to remain and keep control of that gate, right? Remember where that transaction is coming from. Let's forget phones for a moment. They just want to have that transaction and keep that control for many obvious business reasons. So I understand it can be a deterrent sometimes. What I think the card companies are doing great is that, for example, MasterCard with their payment facilitator program, regardless if that's the intention or not, but it is putting pressure to these folks to now realize that somebody can do like what iSettle did with Santander and get sponsorship in other regions. And they will start acquiring transactions regardless if you allow me to pass through the gate or not. The question is, are you going to be in that equation or not? You see, mobile, I think the fact that you have payment service providers and payment facilitators that can get all kinds of variances and licenses to kind of go, Visa has a new system that you can connect directly to Visa. You still need to acquire in the back end. But all these things that are happening on phones, because those transactions are being lost today, it's not like they're taking them. Those transactions are not being accepted today. So if you want to jump on them and you want to accept them, you either jump on this boat or somebody else will find a creative way of doing that. Because, it was like, I remember a lot of the bankers back in the internet time, if you will ask them what was the internet strategy, it was like, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. That was the best internet strategy. I see a lot of them in the mobile strategy that they do like this. They see no evil and they hear no evil. No, it's not going to happen. And then you have, iSettle announcing publicly that they were taking 3,000 accounts a day in Brazil. It kind of normalized. They made a public release that normalized about 1,200 accounts a day. If you ask any of the single acquirers, how many of them have been able to do that on their own? 3,000 new merchants, real merchants. Because this is not, in the US, you have a lot of quasi-merchants, people that are really not merchants. I want to sell you my bike, and I sell it to you, and then I go to sleep. That's not really a merchant. And even though they say they got so many millions of people, a lot of them are going to sleep. But what we see internationally, these are real bona fide businesses that just didn't qualify for regular POS. So to your answer, it is on the one side, yes, I agree, that is true. The gatekeeper can hold on to these things for a long time. On the other hand, I think that what is happening on mobile and these new licenses and variances and things that are allowing payment facilitators and aggregators to come in and take that volume is putting the pressure for them to jump on that boat faster than they would have before, is what I'm saying.
That's a great question. Next question. We have one up here in the front, and then I have a question as well.
So one of the challenges that we face is where the risk ultimately lives. Payment facilitator model is great for creating our traditional segments, but again, it's where the risk is held, right? So what advice, guidance would you give acquirers to be more open to that?
You want me to tell you? But it was a MasterCard to MasterCard.
No, MasterCard's risky. Come on. See, he's
I might be concerned here.
he de-risked that question by not answering it.
Well, you know, I was talking to a gentleman. There's a gentleman back there from the Caribbean that had a very smart point on this. And this has been a great show, by the way. You get to exchange with a lot of great people. I think that we complicate things when we start talking about phones. All of a sudden, we're thinking that merchant acquiring is different because we're accepting through the phone. I think the underlying parameters, you know, for the small guy, merchants, acquirers, they know what they do when it comes to know your business, know your customers, how do I approve you or not. If I have better technology to make faster decisions, I think the system is not broken on that regard. You know, you guys have a great system of having a principal member, and that member sponsors folks that are going to be able to acquire transactions. I think the payment facilitator idea was great. Put a cap of 100,000, you know, and then after that you got to have a regular merchant acquiring. But the risk will always lie on the sponsoring bank. So personally, I don't know what that would change. You know, acquiring through phones to terminals is acquiring. Bigger transactions, smaller transactions, that's my humble opinion.
I think, I tend to think it in two terms. First is the risk of finding these new clients. What is the risk that they're bringing into the system? So do we need a different set of rules for acquiring these new merchants? And I think the answer is yes, because usually they're not an established business. They have other patterns of transactionality, they have mobility bias, and so I think, back to my point, the business model has to address this new reality and needs to address the risk issue in a different way. So selecting and onboarding these new merchants, you have to think the risk differently. And then it goes to the transactionality. Again, you know, I think merchants and issuers were very used to finding patterns of the right type of transactions. But this is a new world. These people are transacting very differently with other patterns that traditional risk scoring will not capture. So again, you have to think it differently. And so my point is that the companies that are going to be successful need to address these two types of risks.
That's a great question and a great answer. And I guess, you know, if we talk about risk, and we talk about the role of the network, right? And we have Visa earlier and MasterCard here. You know, what is MasterCard doing to support or promote the development of these types of things? I mean, obviously, ultimately, going through your network, you're a huge component on the risk, and so you kind of have to de-risk the transaction. You provide a merchant, which is the use case for why mobile payments makes sense moving from cash, because you can provide surety to the merchant that, hey, if I say yes, it's a good transaction. But what is MasterCard doing to support and promote the development of these types of deployments?
Yes, and the first thing is getting the word out. That, you know, sort of trying to level set all the knowledge that's out there. Because for some might be some business as usual, but for others it's a completely new industry. So how do we promote innovation? How do we accept these, as I was talking about the entrepreneurs, how do we really support these entrepreneurs who are bringing a lot of innovation to this industry? So it's a lot around level setting, sharing the knowledge, making sure that we promote these standards and let them know that what's the purpose for these rules. It's not just because we want to have rules, it's because they have a purpose. It's because we want to make sure that the networks are, the integrity of the networks are sustained for the benefit of the development of the payments industry. So a lot has to do with it. And we're also, you know, finding facilitating their market entry. So, because you might be a small company, but how do you navigate the difficulties or the complexities of typically a very closed industry? So it's around that.
Other questions from the floor? I've got one more question kind of ready here. So having said that, if I ask Oscar this question, it may be a little bit self-serving for him, but what is the right solution that should be deployed across?
Well, that's simple. That's charge anywhere.
See? All right.
Thank
So
you.
now that you've answered,
Thank you.
that question was meant to be.
No, listen, thank you so much. The reality is that in Guillermo talked about Mexico, and Mexico has a peculiarity that is EMV with signature. We were talking about NFC earlier on the event. Our take on this is that merchants just want to get paid. We keep complicating this thing, and if we go back to how this all started, I don't know how much of you know, but smart cards, this thing was created in 1970. The first batch came out in 1982, 1984. Today in the US we have 0. And if you ask me what is the most convenient way to pay is with the finger. I never leave it at home. It's always with me, and it is my signature. This finger, by the way. But
His right thumb has been cut off.
It's a thumb finger. But it failed. Pay by touch, but by pay, there was a lot of noise and blah blah. And it ultimately failed because, again, I give you a lot of money on your finger, and you couldn't buy food. In 1 or 2 supermarkets, you couldn't put gas in your car. So we've been in this rodeo before. It's not new. If it was plastic, it was BioPay, if it was contactless, now it's phones. Our take as a technology enabler is that merchants just want to get paid. So, we get the question all the time, is it going to be NFC, is it going to be QR codes? Enable them all. Have them all available. If you have 10 customers that came in with NFC, then those are 10 NFC transactions that you wouldn't get otherwise. So have them enable. Enable be mode of entry and tender type neutral. Understand that in different regions, different models will win. If you need EMV with PIN, that's one region. If you are in the US and you have an ISO concentrated acquiring market, that is not what happens in the rest of the world, that you don't have ISO 7-day technology. In the US, the merchants pay for the technology. In the other sides of the world, the acquirer or the payment processor. So you have to definitely make it work for the region. It is the answer for this will depend on the region. Ultimately, again, and never losing track that merchants want to get paid. So enable all tender types that you can. Have a platform that is secure. You don't want to lack on security. That's important. But that is flexible enough that as things will continue to evolve, you can evolve with that. And that means everything. For example, audio jack readers, one of the big mistakes that I've seen in some deployments is that you put all this money to deploy a whole platform around one particular piece of hardware. But tomorrow, a Chinese company is going to come and is going to charge you half for that piece of hardware. And ultimately, the price point of these things are crucial to mass penetration of these products. So you don't want to build a full ecosystem around a given piece of hardware, because tomorrow you'll have another, and next day you'll have this, and then next day is with NFC, and next. So you have to be mode of entry neutral, operating system neutral. You don't know if Android is going to beat Apple, if BlackBerry, after they got $1 billion, is coming back or not. I want them to come back because that's a phone I use. But other than that, I might be the only customer. No, there's 2 customers here with BlackBerry. The CEO is another BlackBerry user. But
it's tough to type with only one thumb on a BlackBerry.
Yeah. So, enable all types of payments, regardless if you're doing this through phones or you're doing this through terminals. Have a platform that is secure, that is validated, that you can prove. Don't just tell me, show me certifications and validations that exist, and have a platform that is flexible enough to evolve as different types of products and wallets and things continue, that you can keep adding to this. And the deployment that I've seen that are being successful are the deployment that everybody is doing this for the benefit of their core business. It's not me trying, ISIS, for example, originally, they were trying to see how much money they can take from the issuers. I want to charge you to put the card in here. That's not the right business model, right?
It didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work, right, as you can tell. So everybody works with the core business in mind, accepting all types of payments, and secure platform that can show proper certifications, validations. I think that's what it is.
And if you want to just kind of answer that same question as the last parenthesis.
So I guess it goes back to yes, and I was saying it before. You have to develop your business model and accommodate it to the market you're within. So it has to be fit for purpose. So the technology might be a common ground, but then you have to adjust and adapt to each of the markets. We don't have a common business model that's going to be successful all around the world. So you have to be flexible. You have to understand the realities of each market and make your business model around it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming.